Hello everyone, my name is Noah, my pronouns are they, them, and welcome to this Set Studio video. Today, if you're watching this video when it goes live, is Trans Day of Visibility, or TDoV as it is abbreviated. It is March 31st every year, and I decided it was the perfect chance to share some of the books that I have read or want to read about transgender people and their experiences as a way to celebrate the day and just as a good resource in general. As we're getting into it, you'll probably notice that I don't have all of the books here with me. Some of them I will just include the covers on the screen. Maybe it's because I rented them from the library or I listened to them as an audiobook and I just don't have a copy of them with me, but I will be sure to include all of the information down below, which we will talk more about at the end. So we're going to start with books that I have already read. The very first one we have is At 30, I Realized I Had No Gender, Life Lessons from a 50-Year-Old After 2 Decades of Self-Discovery. And this is a manga memoir by Shou Arai, and this is what it looks like. It is bound on the opposite side from Western books, as is typical, and I actually just finished this book this week. I wanted to read it so that I had another book to talk about for this video, and I had been very curious about this book and been wanting to read it since I purchased it last year. And this book is, like I said, a manga memoir by Shou Arai, and it spends a lot of the time talking about things that he has experienced while growing older and aging as an intersex, non-binary, agender person, which I thought was really interesting and not something that we see a lot of. Unfortunately, there is not a lot of resources written by older transgender folks for various reasons. And the fact that this is a Japanese author is something that I don't see often. It's often American authors or Western authors specifically, and I wanted to learn more about different transgender people of different ages and from different places around the world. I really enjoyed this book. Did not take me long to read. If you are a fan of graphic novels or manga and memoirs, this would definitely be a good book for you. Like I said, the author Shou Arai is intersex and transgender. The overlap between being intersex and being transgender is definitely a Venn diagram. Some transgender people are also intersex, and some intersex people also identify as transgender, but not every intersex person considers themselves transgender. I think this book is a great resource for learning about the perspectives of someone of an age group that is not my own and maybe isn't yours, or maybe somebody from your own age group that has a different perspective, because we all have different perspectives. Like I said, the author is Japanese. I am not Japanese. I am an American who is white of mixed European heritage, so different perspective for me, both in terms of age and race/nationality. And yeah, really enjoyed, would highly recommend. Our next book is the graphic memoir Genderqueer, a memoir by Maia Kobabe. And like I said, it's another graphic novel, graphic memoir. And this is a Stonewall Honor Award, which is an award given by the American Library Association. So this book is about Maia's life as E grew up, when E was a child, all the way through E's adolescence, teenhood, college, and your life as an adult now. This is also a memoir, like I said, but it focuses on a different time in your life, younger than what Shou Arai talks about. And yeah, I really enjoyed this book when I read it because I related to a lot of what Kobabe said. I am also an AFAB non-binary person who spent a lot of time in my childhood out in nature. We had a lot in common in that way, and it was really nice to get to hear another perspective about someone's life. This one's also great if you're someone who wants to read but maybe doesn't like a lot of words, or are learning English and want a book to read that has less words. I really enjoy graphic novels and memoirs when I am practicing my Spanish, which is a language I am learning, because I can use the words with the context clues, and I find that a little bit easier to read. So if that's something you're looking for but you don't want a translation, this might be helpful. I really did enjoy this book. I thought that Kobabe did a really good job in terms of sharing how they felt inwardly about different things going on in their life specifically, because I know that it can be hard, at least for me, to parse my own feelings and thought process, and I thought that was something that E did very well. Also, E is obviously an artist, a cartoonist, so if that's something you're interested in, if you're interested in the cartoon industry or, writing graphic novels, E talks about that a bit in here, so while Shou Arai is also obviously a manga artist and writer. He doesn't talk so much about his art and experience with being a transgender artist, agender artist, an intersex artist in Japan. He talks more about his experience of being an intersex person, agender person, just in general. So if you're interested in a little bit about someone talking about your experiences in that field, this one might be a good one for you. The next two we have are a set, and these actually belong to my girlfriend, but I have read both of them. This is Super Late Bloomer, My Early Days in Transition, an Up and Out collection by Julia Kaye. And then the sequel, which is My Life in Transition, a Super Late Bloomer collection by Julia Kaye as well. And these are also comics. They aren't so much graphic novels, but they are comics. I did not realize how many on this list were going to be comics or graphic in form. I really enjoy the formatting of Julia Kaye's works because they remind me of the compendiums of Garfield and Calvin and Hobbes I would rent from the library with my siblings as a child. I really enjoyed reading Julia Kaye's works, especially this first one. I'm glad that she talks a lot about her early days in transition in this book because I feel like that is something that is so different and so personal for everyone and happens at different points in their life. So to get to hear her perspective, even if it is only one perspective, is really nice. And then My Life in Transition is a continuation, so these are comics that come from later in her life, so you get to hear more about her life once she has gotten further into her transition. She's a little more settled in her new identity, and yeah, I think that both of these books are very nice ways to look at the interaction in between the author Julia and the people in her life, as well as her own perception of herself and her own perception of her transition. Whereas at 30, I realized I had no gender, talks a lot about the perspective of someone who has been transitioned, I suppose you could say, for a long time. Shou Arai talks about realizing he was not a woman, that he was intersex, that he was agender, all of those things together 20 years in the past from where he is now. Whereas Julia Kaye's books talk more about the experience more as it happens. Obviously, she wasn't drawing the comics the day that she had the thought, but they were more recent in her life. So that's another aspect of the way these things are different and could be nice together. And Julia Kaye is also an artist, a comic artist like Kobabe. So again, if you're interested in reading about stories of people from that industry and have that focus in their life, that is something to consider and why you might like these books as well. We finally have a non-graphic memoir. This is Pageboy, a memoir by Elliot Page. I read this past summer. I'm always a little bit hesitant to read memoirs from celebrities because a lot of times their story is very unrelatable to me because they've had a very different life. A lot of times celebrities had parents who were also celebrities or came from very wealthy backgrounds, but that's not the case with Elliot Page. He had divorced parents like I did and a mother who was working very hard to raise him as a strong, independent child, and he also had a relationship with his father that maybe wasn't the best, which was similar to my relationship with my father. And so there were a lot of things in this book that I found very relatable. It's not a super long book, as you can see. So if you're intimidated by very thick books, I would say, honestly, none of these books here are super long. So that's something great going for them if that's something that you find intimidated. And yeah, I really thought that it was, I thought that it was nice to be able to read about an experience that, while Elliot Page's experience in life is so different from mine, I'm not interested in acting, I'm not going to move to California, I don't want to star in movies, I think he's Canadian, I'm not Canadian, I'm American. So there were all these differences, but there was also a lot of common ground, and he also talks about his experience identifying as a lesbian, as a gay woman for a while, before he realized he was actually a man. And I feel like that is something that can be very confusing for people who aren't familiar with transgender experiences, if they maybe don't know a lot of transgender people or just are unfamiliar with the concept. And Page talks a bit about that experience of having the identity shift and how it affected him, as well as his time as an actor. So yeah, that to me is what makes the memoir Pageboy by Elliot Page a good choice if you're looking for maybe someone who's interested in acting, if that's something you're interested in, someone whose identity has changed a lot, who has been very visible in the LGBT plus community over the years. That's definitely a couple good reasons why you might want to read Elliot Page's book. And I also just genuinely enjoyed it. I've enjoyed all of these books. I felt like Page's writing style was very approachable, but it was also very enjoyable. It wasn't overly simplistic, but like I said, I enjoyed it. Sometimes he made me laugh. I really felt the emotion that he portrayed on the page. That is our first non-graphic memoir. So one other book that I want to talk about that I have read but do not physically own a copy of is If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo. Now this is a YA book. All of the other books I've mentioned have been more general adult audiences. They're definitely appropriate for teens. I would say they're all fine. But if you are looking for something that was written with a younger audience in mind, If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo is definitely a great choice for that. That book is, I think, maybe a couple years old now, but it is very good. I remember reading it when it first came out. It is about a high school girl who moves in with her father in a small town, and she's going to a new school, she's making new friends, she has a budding romantic relationship, and she's trying to live stealth as a trans woman or a trans girl because she's not an adult yet. Being stealth means that you do not advertise, you do not make it known that you are a trans person. You are just trying to live as the gender that you are without anyone knowing. And this is something that some trans people decide to do for many reasons, one of them being safety, which is definitely something that comes up in If I Were Your Girl. And so that is something to consider if you are looking for novels about trans folks. There's always a chance that there's going to be certain triggering content. I mean, really with any book about a trans person, there's always a chance that they're going to be talking about triggering content, so definitely do your research before you start reading books. I would say that If I Were Your Girl by Meredith Russo is not super... There's nothing extremely graphic or super rough and challenging. There are, like I said, there is some instances of transphobia and stuff like that, but I really thought it was a great representation of the teen life in a small town. I still identified as cis when I was a teen, but I did grow up in a small town, so I am familiar with what that sort of dynamic is like, and I really thought that it was an accurate representation, at least of my experience. Obviously, every small town is going to be different, just like everyone's trans experience is going to be different, but I thought it was really good on that front, and I really also enjoyed the realism. As you see, all of these books are, I mean, obviously they're memoirs, they can't be too fantastical because they happened in our reality, but I wanted to focus on books that were more geared towards everyday life. So if you wanted a good representation of what an actual trans person's life might be like, you could see that. And that is, you know, a good example here. This is the only novel we have on this list, but I think it's definitely a good option. You could also read it if you're an adult. I read it as an adult. I was not a teen when it was released, and I enjoyed it. So, I mean, it depends. If you really hate YA fiction, maybe don't read it, but I enjoyed it. And I wanted to bring in on this list the option to have more of a different mindset. All of the other people in these books that I've mentioned so far have all been out as transgender, as non-binary, as agender, as intersex. So I wanted another option where the character was not out about it. So yeah, that was one reason why I wanted to include If I Were Your Girl by Meredith Russo on this list. And it's a good book. I really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend it, like I recommend all these books. Now we're going to go to books that are on my TBR that I haven't read yet. We'll start with the two that I actually have, and then we'll talk about some that I don't. The first one I have here is Transgender History, The Roots of Today's Revolution by Susan Stryker, and this is the revised edition. I bought this summer when I was at the beach. I'm very excited to read this. If you are familiar with some of my other works, my other videos, my blog posts, I'm very interested in the history of LGBT plus people and just how we have moved through the world and how our perception of identity as a group has changed. So I find books like this really interesting. And I don't have too much else to say about this. I can tell you what they say about the author on the back of the book. It says, Suzanne Stryker is an associate professor of gender and women's studies at the University of Arizona and founding co-editor of TS2 Transgender Studies Quarterly. She has won a Lambda Literary Award for the anthology The Transgender Studies Reader, Routledge 2006, and an Emmy Award for the documentary film Screaming Queens, The Riot at Compton's Cafeteria. Both sound like things I would enjoy, and maybe you would enjoy as well. So the final book that I physically have that's on my TBR is Transgender Warriors, Making History from Joan of Arc to Marsha P. Johnson and Beyond. This is the 25th anniversary edition, and it was written by Leslie Feinberg, who is the author of Stone Butch Blues, which is another book I want to read, but I haven't yet. So many books, so little time. Leslie Feinberg is a very well-known activist in terms of gender and sexuality, and Z is known as a butch. Z is transgender, uses Z here pronouns, is also sometimes identified as a lesbian. Z identity is very much kind of a fusion of gender and who they're attracted to, and it is not something that's often talked about on the internet because it's very context-based, it's very nuanced, and it's very personal. All things that thrive on the internet. But I will say, if you're interested in who Z is as a person, as well as hear other writings, I would recommend looking Z up. I do not feel qualified to talk about her identity and all of that because I am still learning about it myself, and this video is about books. So yes, like I said, this is Transgender Warriors. I actually bought this book when I was visiting a bookstore called Giovanni's Room this past July. And if you don't know, Giovanni's Room is a very famous historical bookstore that is known for being one of the oldest, if not the oldest, queer bookstore in America. And I would highly recommend visiting it if you're ever in the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area. It is in a section called the Gayborhood, so the whole area is very interesting. I had a great time walking around, learning about the history, and I really enjoyed the bookstore itself. I could have stayed there for hours. The staff were super nice, and this was one of the books I came away with. One thing that excites me about this book, having flipped through it, I noticed that not only does it talk about trans history, there's also a lot of Leslie's voice in this book. Z talks about her experiences doing the research and doing the learning yourself, and I find that really fascinating. I love to hear from other trans individuals about their perception of our history and what it means to them and all of that. On my TBR, for books that I don't have, I'm going to look at my phone for this one because it's a very long title. We have Black on Both Sides, A Racial History of Trans Identity by C. Riley Snorton. And that is really the only book right now that I have on my TBR that is about trans history that I don't own. There are a lot of other books that are about queer history and books that maybe overlap a little bit, but I decided to keep it a little more concise. But I'm really excited about reading that book because I want to learn more from different perspectives, and race is a big part of our identity in modern America and has been for several hundred years since it was created, and it really impacts people's perspectives of other identities in their life, and intersectionality is something that is really important and feels like something that I should understand if I want to understand more about trans history. There's also a book called The House of Swann, which is about William Dorsey Swann, and I cannot remember the author right now, and I'm not sure how much that one is going to touch on trans history, but I feel like it's going to be one of those books where it is capturing an era where gender and sexuality were a lot more intermingled and fluid than we often consider them now. And that book is about the first drag queens in America. And I can't remember the author's name, but I will include it. And like I said, that is sort of one of those books that's a little more fluid, and that is a segue into the last two sort of bonus books we have here today. The first one is Bad Gays, A Homosexual History by Hugh Lemmy and Ben Miller, and as you can see, I have read this book already. It's got lots of tabs on it, and this book is about LGBTQ history in general, so it's not just trans people, and it does focus more so on cis queer people, but there is some talk about how the queer people in this book affected trans people as well as trans individuals. And I really enjoyed this book because I feel like a lot of times there's a lot of pressure to act like trans and queer people can do no wrong because we're persecuted, but that is not true. Just because someone is a member of the LGBTQ plus community or identifies as queer or whatever means that they're a good person. That is not true. And I feel like this is a very interesting way to approach our collective history. I really enjoyed this book. The authors are both fantastic writers. And yeah, it was really good. Would highly recommend. And then we have A Queer History of the United States by Michael Bronski, and this book is obviously a little more narrow in scope, whereas Bad Gays focused on people from all over the globe. This is A Queer History of the United States, so not only is it more narrow in terms of place, but also time, as the United States only existed from the 1700s through now, so that definitely makes it a little more narrow in scope. This one also has some tabbies on it. I also read this one. Both of these books were books that I've used for research while working on my tarot deck that I'm currently working on. So I enjoyed both of them. I marked them up. I don't know. You can see there's some highlighter in there. This one is, again, more of a mix between cis queer people and trans people, but it's all very mixed together, especially in the past. The more you learn about queer and trans history, the more you'll see that gender identity and sexuality have often been very fluid, are very strict delineations that we have in recent history and currently are not that old of concepts. So you will see there is a bit of that mixing, which is why I wanted to include these two books as overlaps. I thought it would be worth it to talk about them, even if they're not as specific as the others are. So yeah, those are all of the books I wanted to talk about today. I hope this video was interesting. I wanted to give y'all some references for books you could read to learn more about transgender individuals and trans history. And if you're interested in learning more about the holiday Trans Day of Visibility, I suppose you could call it a holiday, and different types of media, including TV shows, movies, maybe even some video games, as well as these books and more, you can check out the blog post I will have linked below that will also be going live today if you're watching this the day that it is being posted. I would highly recommend that you check out these books maybe at your local library. You can use apps like Libby and Hoopla if getting to a library is maybe a challenge for you. But if you're interested in purchasing the books, I'm also going to leave links down below to all of the books from a website called bookshop.org. This website gives independent bookstores who are signed up a cut of the profit from each book sold. And of course, the links down below will be affiliate links, which means I will get a small commission each time you purchase a book via that link. It will not cost you any more either to help the independent bookstores or to use the affiliate link. So I would definitely recommend it. And yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to share. Be sure to check out my blog about this day if you're interested in it. Let me know, have you read any of these books? Have you enjoyed them? What other books should I read? There are so many books out there. I would love to hear about the ones that you've enjoyed. And yeah, so leave a comment, talk about those things down below, talk about something else that I didn't think of. Be sure to like the video if you liked it, dislike the video if you disliked it, but if you didn't like it, why are you still here? Go drink some water, go hug a loved one, go touch some grass, go do something that makes you happy. You really do not need to be watching YouTube videos if you don't enjoy them. Ring the bell so you know when I post videos. They're not super regular right now, but I am trying to make a few more going forward, and subscribe so that you will be aware of all of my content as it comes out as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you are able to do something that brings you joy today. Bye!